My name is Elena Morgan, and for 12 years, I thought I knew the man I was married to. My husband Daniel always smiled when he spoke Spanish with clients and realtors, assuming I couldn't understand a single word. He had no idea that my grandmother spent every summer teaching me her native language, that I grew up speaking it fluently in her kitchen while we cooked together. That small secret, that tiny assumption he made about me, became the thread that unraveled everything. The day he stood in that beautiful Spanish-style house and told the realtor I didn't need to know the financial details, I realized my silence wasn't ignorance. It was power. And I was about to use every word I understood to save myself from a betrayal I never saw coming. If you're watching this video right now, drop a comment telling me where you're from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories. They say marriage is built on trust, on honesty, on the kind of intimacy that comes from truly knowing someone. For 12 years, I believed Daniel and I had that foundation. We had our rituals, our rhythms, the small ceremonies of daily life that bind two people together. Sunday morning coffee on the back porch, his hand finding mine during movie credits, the way he'd leave sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with terrible jokes that made me laugh despite myself. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were real. But lately, something had shifted. It was subtle at first, like a photograph slowly fading in sunlight, the colors leaching away so gradually you don't notice until one day you realize the image is almost gone. The way he'd look past me instead of at me during dinner. The way conversations felt rehearsed rather than natural, as if he was performing the role of attentive husband rather than being one. The way our home, once warm with shared dreams and easy laughter, now echoed with an absence I couldn't quite name but felt in every room. I'm Elena Morgan, 36 years old, and I work as a school counselor at Jefferson Middle School. My job is reading people, understanding what they're not saying, catching the small tells that reveal the truth beneath the surface. I've been trained to notice when a student's smile doesn't reach their eyes, when their words say one thing but their body language screams another. I pride myself on my intuition, on being able to see through facades and get to the heart of what someone is really feeling. Ironic, isn't it? I spend my days helping teenagers navigate their problems, mediating conflicts, identifying warning signs of trouble, while completely missing the earthquake building beneath my own marriage. The fault lines were there, I realize now. I just didn't want to see them. Or maybe I saw them and told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that 12 years of marriage meant something solid and unshakable. I was wrong. It started 3 weeks ago when Daniel came home with an energy I hadn't seen in months. His eyes were bright, almost feverish, and there was a flush in his cheeks that spoke of either excitement or anxiety. I couldn't tell which. He burst through the door at 5:30, earlier than usual, and dropped his laptop bag with a thud that made me look up from the student files I'd been reviewing at the dining room table. "Elena," he said, grabbing my hands and pulling me to my feet. "I found it. The house. Our dream house." The words tumbled over each other, rapid fire, his grip on my hands almost painful in its intensity. "It's perfect. Spanish-style architecture, clay tile roof, vine-covered archways, this incredible garden with roses and a fountain. The couple selling it are from Spain, real Spaniards, not just Spanish-speaking. They have to move back quickly for family reasons, something about an illness, so the price is amazing. Below market value. We'd be crazy not to jump on this." I smiled, wanting to feel his excitement, wanting to share in this moment that should have been joyful. We'd talked about moving for years, about finding a bigger place with a yard, somewhere with more character than our functional but bland two-bedroom condo. But something felt off. His enthusiasm was too big, too urgent, like he was trying to sell me on something rather than share something with me. "That sounds wonderful, honey," I said, squeezing his hands. "I can't wait to see it. When can we go look at it together?" The shift was instant and unmistakable. His face flickered, a micro-expression of annoyance or maybe panic before he smoothed it away. His grip on my hands loosened, and he let go entirely, stepping back to create distance between us.
"Oh, right."
"Well, I mean, I've already seen it twice. This week, actually. The market's so competitive right now, Elena. Houses like this don't last. We need to move fast, make a decision quickly. He turned away from me, busying himself with his laptop bag, pulling out papers and his phone, suddenly very interested in checking his messages. But yeah, sure, if you want to come along to the next viewing, I guess that's fine. You should probably see it before we make an offer. I guess that's fine. The words hung in the air like smoke. This was supposed to be our dream house, the next chapter of our life together, the home where we might finally start the family we'd been putting off, and he made it sound like my presence was an afterthought. An inconvenience he was grudgingly accommodating. I'll need to rearrange my schedule at work, I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral even as my counselor instincts screamed that something was very wrong here. I have a meeting with parents tomorrow afternoon, but I can probably reschedule. When's the viewing? Tomorrow afternoon. 3 o'clock. He still wasn't looking at me, scrolling through his phone with practiced casualness. But really, Elena, you don't have to stress about it if work is busy. I can handle the initial negotiations, the inspection details, all that boring stuff. You know I'm better with the financial side anyway. That last part stung more than it should have. Better with the financial side, as if I was some kind of child who couldn't understand adult matters. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology and manage a budget for an entire school department, but sure, Daniel, you handle the boring details. That night, I lay in bed pretending to read a novel while Daniel sat beside me scrolling through his phone. He kept glancing at the time, shifting restlessly, radiating a nervous energy that kept me on edge. Finally, around 10:30, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and something passed over his face. Relief? Anticipation? Work call, he muttered, already sliding out of bed. I have to take this. Conference call with the European team. I nodded, watching him grab his phone and pad out into the hallway in his pajama pants and t-shirt. He closed the bedroom door behind him, but not all the way. A sliver of light from the hallway cut across our darkened room. I set down my book and listened. His voice was low, urgent, barely above a whisper. At first, I couldn't make out individual words, just the cadence and tone of someone who didn't want to be overheard. Then I caught it, that rolling rhythm, those particular vowels. He was speaking Spanish. My Spanish. The language my abuela had taught me during those long, sun-drenched summers at her house in New Mexico, her patient voice correcting my pronunciation as we rolled empanadas together, as she told me stories about her childhood in Sevilla, as she made me promise to never forget where I came from. I hadn't spoken Spanish regularly since she passed away 10 years ago, shortly before I met Daniel. It simply never came up in our relationship. He knew I had a Spanish grandmother. I'd shown him photos, but we'd never had a conversation about whether I spoke the language. It just never seemed important. We spoke English to each other. We lived in an English-speaking world, and my Spanish became something private and dormant, a part of my past that I carried quietly but rarely accessed. Now, lying in the dark, I heard fragments of conversations seeping through the crack in the door. No, ella no sabrá nada. No, she won't know anything.
A pause, temor insistently. Te digo que está bien. No habla ni una palabra. Está completamente a oscuras.
I'm telling you it's fine. She doesn't speak a single word. She's completely in the dark. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I was sure he could hear it from the hallway. The casual certainty in his voice, the dismissive way he spoke about me, cut deeper than the words themselves. He was planning something he believed I would never understand because he'd made an assumption about me. An assumption I'd never corrected because it had never mattered. Until now. I heard his footsteps approaching and forced my body into the relaxed posture of sleep. Slow, even breaths, muscles loose, eyes closed but not squeezed shut. He pushed the door open carefully and stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching me. I could feel his gaze on my face, assessing, checking, making sure I was truly asleep, that I hadn't heard anything that would complicate his plans. Finally, he slipped back into bed. The mattress dipped under his weight, and he settled in beside me with a soft sigh. Within minutes, his breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep, but I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling in the darkness, my mind racing through every conversation we'd had recently, every strange behavior, every moment that hadn't quite added up. He was speaking Spanish to someone about me, planning something he needed to keep hidden, and he believed I was oblivious. He had no idea that every word had landed like a stone in my chest, that his secret language was my native tongue. The next morning arrived gray and overcast, matching my mood perfectly. I'd maybe slept 2 hours, my mind churning through possibilities and fears until dawn crept through our bedroom curtains. When my alarm went off at 6:30, Daniel was already awake, unusually cheerful, almost manic in his good spirits. "Good morning, beautiful," he sang out, already dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt. The smell of coffee and something sweeter wafted from the kitchen. I made breakfast. "Come on, let's eat before we both have to rush off." I dragged myself out of bed, my eyes gritty with exhaustion, and followed him to the kitchen. He'd made scrambled eggs, toast, even cut up fresh fruit and arranged it on a plate. Daniel, who usually grabbed a protein bar on his way out the door, had prepared an actual breakfast spread. The domesticity of it would have been touching if it didn't feel so calculated. "You seem energized this morning," I said, accepting the coffee he pressed into my hands. "Well, it's an exciting day, right? You're going to see the house." He beamed at me, his smile too wide, too bright. "I really think you're going to love it, Elena. I can picture us there, you know? Sunday morning coffee in that courtyard. Maybe getting a dog now that we'd have a yard. It could be a fresh start for us." A fresh start. The words should have warmed me. Instead, they sent a chill down my spine. What exactly did he think we needed a fresh start from? As I picked at my eggs, forcing myself to eat despite my churning stomach, Daniel kept up a steady stream of chatter. Details about the house, the neighborhood, the school district that would be perfect when we had kids. That last part almost made me choke. We'd been trying for a baby for 3 years with no success, a source of quiet heartbreak I'd learned not to mention because it only seemed to stress Daniel out. Now, suddenly, he was painting pictures of our future children playing in this mystery garden. "Oh, and Elena," he said casually as he loaded dishes into the dishwasher, his back to me. The couple selling the house, Luis and Marisol, they're native Spanish speakers. Mostly speak Spanish, actually. My Spanish is pretty rusty from those college courses, but I can muddle through enough to handle the real estate talk. Don't worry about trying to make conversation or anything. Just let me handle the discussions with them, okay? I know how you get anxious in social situations where you can't fully participate. I stared at his back, at the casual confidence in his posture, at the way he'd just completely mischaracterized me. I don't get anxious in social situations. I'm a school counselor who mediates conflicts and speaks to parents and students all day long. But I just nodded, playing the role he'd assigned me. "Sure, honey. Whatever you think is best." The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Work dragged interminably. I rescheduled my parent meeting, making apologies to a concerned mother whose daughter was struggling with depression, promising we'd meet first thing tomorrow instead. Guilt gnawed at me, but I couldn't focus on anyone else's problems when my own life was unraveling. I watched the clock, counseled 3 students on autopilot, and left the moment the final bell rang. Daniel picked me up in his silver Lexus at 2:30, insisting we drive together even though it meant I'd have to get a ride back to school to pick up my car later. "It'll be nice," he said. "We can talk on the way, make plans." But we didn't talk. At least, not about anything real. Daniel filled the silence with more descriptions of the house, occasionally checking his phone at red lights, his jaw tight with tension he was trying to hide. I watched him from the passenger seat, this man I'd shared a bed with for 12 years, and realized I was looking at a stranger. When had that happened? Or had I just never really known him at all? About 10 minutes into the drive, I heard him muttering under his breath. At first I thought he was singing along to the radio, but then I realized he was practicing phrases. Spanish phrases. Los documentos financieros, la transferencia de propiedad, cómo manejar el papeleo. The financial documents. The property transfer. How to handle the paperwork. Then, so quietly I almost missed it. La otra persona llegará pronto. The other person will arrive soon. My hands clenched in my lap. I stared out the window at the passing suburban landscape, safe houses with neat lawns and basketball hoops in driveways, families living normal lives while mine crumbled with each mile. What other person? Who was coming? And why did this house viewing suddenly feel less like looking at real estate and more like walking into a trap? The house appeared at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in an established neighborhood where the trees were mature and the properties sat on generous lots. It was exactly as Daniel had described, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Spanish-style stucco painted in warm terracotta tones, a clay tile roof that caught the afternoon light, wooden beams visible under the eaves. Vine-covered archways framed the entrance, leading to what looked like a central courtyard. Bougainvillea climbed the walls in cascades of magenta and orange. It was the kind of house I'd dog-eared in magazines, the kind of place I'd imagined raising children, growing old, building a life. And Daniel had found it for someone else. The thought hit me like a physical blow as he parked in the circular driveway. This wasn't for us. Whatever he was planning, whoever he'd been whispering to in Spanish in the dark, this beautiful house was part of a future that didn't include me. I knew it with the same certainty I knew my own name. "Ready?" Daniel asked, turning to me with that rehearsed smile, the one that didn't quite reach his eyes. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My throat felt tight, my chest constricted. But I forced myself to breathe evenly, to arrange my face into an expression of pleasant anticipation. I'd spent years counseling teenagers to recognize when they were being lied to, when adults in their lives were hiding things that would hurt them. Now I was the one being deceived, and I had to pretend I didn't see it. The front door opened before we reached it. A man in his mid-60s stepped out, silver-haired and solidly built, with warm brown eyes and the kind of weathered face that spoke of a life well lived. Behind him came a woman, probably a few years younger, with elegant features and dark hair shot through with gray, pulled back in a loose bun. "Daniel," the man said warmly, extending his hand. "Bienvenido otra vez." "Welcome back again. Luis, Marisol, thank you for having us," Daniel said, his smile now genuine as he shook Luis's hand and kissed Marisol's cheek in the European fashion. Then he turned to me, and I watched him shift, becoming the solicitous husband. "This is my wife, Elena." I smiled and shook their hands, noting the way Marisol's gaze lingered on my face a beat too long, assessing me with an intensity that made me wonder what Daniel had told them about me. What story had he spun to explain why his wife needed to be kept in the dark? Daniel immediately launched into Spanish, his pronunciation serviceable but his accent distinctly American, the vowels too flat, the consonants too hard.
Muchas gracias por permitirnos ver la casa de nuevo. Elena está muy emocionada de verla.
Thank you so much for letting us see the house again. Elena is very excited to see it. Luis and Marisol responded politely, inviting us in, and I smiled blandly, playing the part of the monolingual wife who understood nothing. Inside, I was screaming. But on the outside, I was the picture of pleasant ignorance, nodding along, admiring the architecture, completely oblivious to the conversation happening right in front of me. But I understood everything. Every single word. We stepped into the foyer, and my breath caught despite everything. The entry was stunning, with hand-painted tiles underfoot in intricate geometric patterns, cream-colored walls rising to exposed wooden beams, and an arched doorway that framed a view of the courtyard beyond. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through, catching dust motes in golden shafts of light. Under different circumstances, I would have fallen in love with this house instantly. Daniel gestured around, speaking to Luis in Spanish.
Ella no necesita saber los detalles financieros. Es mejor que yo maneje todo eso.
She doesn't need to know the financial details. It's better if I handle all of that. The words landed like a slap across my face, but I kept my expression neutral, even pleasant, as I turned to admire a wrought iron light fixture hanging from the ceiling. Every muscle in my body was tense, coiled tight with the effort of maintaining this charade, but my face betrayed nothing. Years of professional training, of maintaining composure in crisis situations with students and parents, was paying off in ways I never imagined. Marisol stepped closer to me, her presence somehow maternal and protective. She watched me with those knowing eyes, then asked gently, "Entiendes un poco español? Do you understand a little Spanish?"
It was a test.
I could feel it. Something in her tone, in the way she held my gaze, suggested she suspected the truth. But I couldn't break cover. Not yet. Not until I understood what I was dealing with. So I shook my head with an apologetic smile, the universal gesture of someone who wishes they could understand, but simply doesn't. Daniel actually laughed. The sound was casual, almost fond, but underneath it I heard contempt.
Ella apenas puede con el inglés en los días estresantes, said.
She barely manages English on stressful days. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. I felt the blow physically, like he'd punched me in the stomach. This man, who had stood beside me at my grandmother's funeral, who had held my hand through 3 miscarriages, who had promised to love and cherish me until death, had just reduced me to a punchline. A stupid, incompetent wife who couldn't be trusted with basic language or adult responsibilities. I turned away, pretending to study a painting on the wall, scared that my face would finally betray me. Behind the pleasant mask, rage was building, hot and fierce. But beneath the rage was something worse.
Grief.
The crushing weight of realizing that the man I'd loved, the partnership I'd believed in, had been a fiction all along. We moved through the house, and I noticed Daniel wasn't looking at it like a potential home. He was calculating, evaluating, measuring spaces with his eyes. He opened closets and counted bedrooms with an intensity that had nothing to do with where we might put our furniture. This wasn't about us building a life together. This was about something else entirely. In the master bedroom, Luis pointed out the renovated bathroom while Marisol stood close to me, her presence somehow protective. Daniel stepped out onto the balcony with Luis, and through the open door, I heard him say quietly, "La otra llegará la semana que viene."
Necesito esto antes de que mi esposa sospeche.
The other one will arrive next week. I need this before my wife starts suspecting. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Another woman. He was buying this house for another woman, and I was standing here like a prop in his carefully staged production. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to remain upright, to keep the mask in place. Marisol touched my arm gently. "¿Estás cómoda?" she asked in Spanish, then quickly switched to English. "Are you comfortable?" "Yes, thank you," I managed. "Everything's lovely." Her eyes held something that looked like pity, and I knew then that she suspected. Maybe she'd seen this kind of deception before. Maybe something in my face betrayed that I understood more than I let on. Outside in the garden, Daniel's phone rang. He stepped away, answering in that same urgent Spanish I'd heard the night before. I pretended to admire the rose bushes, while every word carved itself into my memory. She thinks this house is for us. She has no idea who it's really for. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, focusing on a red bloom until my eyes cleared. Behind me, I heard Marisol's sharp intake of breath. She'd heard it too. When I turned, she was looking at me with open sympathy now, and she mouthed softly, "Lo siento."
I'm sorry.
She knew I understood. And her pity confirmed what I already suspected. Whatever Daniel was planning, it was obvious enough that even strangers could see through it. The drive home was torture. Daniel chattered about escrow and inspection schedules while I stared out the window, my mind replaying every Spanish phrase, every careful eye. When we pulled into our driveway, our actual home that we'd bought together 8 years ago, I felt like I was looking at a stage set. How much of our life had been real? How long had he been planning this? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the darkness, listening to Daniel's steady breathing, and felt utterly alone. The man beside me was a stranger. Worse, he was a stranger who thought I was stupid, who dismissed my intelligence so casually in a language he believed I couldn't understand. The next morning, I waited until Daniel left for his run before I started searching. Drawers, closet shelves, his home office desk. He was careful. I'd give him that. No incriminating papers left out, his phone password protected, his laptop requiring a fingerprint. But everyone makes mistakes when they think they're safe. I called my cousin Sophia during my lunch break. She worked at a translation office that sometimes handled real estate documents. Sophie, I need a favor. Can you check if any recent property sales in the Canyon Ridge area have my name on them?
Elena Morgan or Elena Reyes Morgan.
There was a pause. Is everything okay? Just checking something, I said, keeping my voice light. Daniel mentioned looking at houses, and I want to make sure we're on the same page legally. 2 hours later, she called back. Elena, I checked everything filed in the last month. Your name isn't on any documents. Not even provisionally. My hand tightened around my phone. Thanks, Sophie. I appreciate it.
Elena.
I have to go. Student meeting. I hung up before she could ask more questions. That evening, Daniel came home with flowers. Roses, my supposed favorite, though he'd somehow forgotten I preferred peonies. He cooked dinner, opened wine, told me stories about his coworkers that felt too polished, too prepared. He was trying so hard to be charming that it felt like watching a performance. You seem distant lately, he said over dessert, reaching for my hand. Is everything okay? The audacity of it nearly made me laugh. Just tired from work, I said. You know how draining adolescent drama can be. My poor Elena, always taking care of everyone else. He squeezed my hand, and I felt nothing. Let me take care of you for once. After he fell asleep, I slipped into his office. The folder was exactly where I'd seen it that morning, tucked into a drawer under some old tax forms. Blank on the outside, but inside, a single printed email in Spanish. Confirmamos su mudanza la próxima semana, Camila. La casa estará lista como solicitó. We confirm your move next week, Camila. The house will be ready as you requested.
Camila.
The other woman had a name now, and Daniel was preparing a house for her while lying in bed beside me each night. I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it and went back to bed. Daniel stirred as I slipped under the covers. Where were you? He mumbled. Bathroom, I whispered. Go back to sleep. He did, easily, peacefully, while I lay awake cataloging every lie, every careful misdirection. I thought about confronting him, throwing the email in his face, demanding truth.
But something stopped me.
A counselor's instinct, maybe, or just a need to understand the full picture before I burned everything down. The next day, I caught him texting during dinner. He angled his phone away, but I saw the message before he could hide it.
Todo va según el plan.
Everything is going according to plan. My fork scraped against my plate. Daniel looked up quickly. You okay?
Fine.
Just tired. The lie came easily now. I was learning his language in more ways than one. That night, I made a decision. I needed to talk to Marisol and Luis. They'd seen something in that house viewing, something that made Marisol apologize to me. They knew more than they'd said, and I needed to hear it. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Daniel was surprised but pleased, probably interpreting it as me being too overwhelmed to suspect anything. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and drove to the Spanish-style house at the end of the quiet cul-de-sac. Marisol answered the door, and her expression shifted from surprise to understanding in a heartbeat. Elena, she said softly. Then, in Spanish, Sabía que volverías. I knew you would come back. I answered in the same language, my voice shaking slightly. Sabía que estabas fingiendo. I knew you were pretending. She stepped aside, opening the door wider.
Por favor, entra.
Please come in. Inside, Luis was reading the newspaper at the kitchen table. He looked up, saw me, and nodded slowly as if I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. Marisol gestured for me to sit, poured coffee without asking, and settled across from me with the air of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. I understood everything he said. I told them in Spanish, the words tumbling out. Every word during the house viewing, about the financial details, about the other woman arriving next week, about hiding it from me. I've been pretending not to understand Spanish, but my grandmother was from Sevilla. I grew up speaking it. Marisol reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I thought so. The way you stood so still when he spoke, like you were holding your breath. And your eyes, they understood even when your face didn't react. What did he tell you?
I asked.
When I wasn't there, what did Daniel say about this house? Luis folded his newspaper carefully, his expression grave. He told us he needed the house urgently, that it was for a new business partnership that required discretion. He said he couldn't put it in his name for legal reasons, that his wife couldn't know about the details because it would complicate things. Legal reasons, I repeated flatly. What kind of legal reasons? He didn't specify, Luis said. But his behavior was strange. Nervous. He offered to pay in cash, wanted the transaction under someone else's name. It didn't feel like a normal house purchase. It felt like someone trying to hide something. My coffee had gone cold in my hands. Did he mention Camila? Marisol and Luis exchanged glances. Yes, Marisol said quietly. A young woman from Colombia. He said she would be living here soon, that she needed a place quickly. He made it sound like a business arrangement, but the way he spoke about her. She trailed off delicately. It wasn't business, I finished. He's having an affair, and he bought her a house. Elena, Marisol said gently, I think it's more than that. Luis and I have been discussing it. The cash payment, the urgency, the deception, this woman from Colombia arriving suddenly. Your husband is involved in something beyond an affair. The words hung in the air between us. Money laundering.
Fraud.
Criminal activity that could implicate me just by being his wife. My hands started shaking, and I set down my cup before I could drop it.
Tu esposo está metido en algo sucio, Luis said quietly.
Your husband is involved in something dirty. You need to protect yourself, Elena. Not just emotionally, legally and financially. I looked at these two kind strangers who had more concern for my welfare than my own husband did. I don't even know where to start. Document everything, Marisol said firmly. Every conversation, every transaction you can access. Open your own bank account if you share finances. Get copies of all your important documents. And find a good lawyer, one who specializes in both family law and financial crimes. I nodded mechanically, my mind already spinning with the logistics of dismantling a life I'd thought was solid. One more thing, Luis added. We're not selling him this house. After the viewing, we discussed it and decided we don't want to be part of whatever he's planning. We'll tell him the sale fell through, for personal reasons. Relief washed over me. Thank you. Thank you both. As I drove home, I felt something shift inside me. The shock was hardening into something else.
Clarity.
Determination. Daniel thought I was oblivious, harmless, easy to deceive. He had no idea that I'd been listening all along, that his secret language was my native tongue. He'd made one critical mistake. He underestimated me in both languages. When I walked through my front door, Daniel was home early, standing in the kitchen with that same false cheerfulness. Hey, feeling better? I was worried when you called in sick. Much better, I said, meeting his eyes. Just needed some rest. He smiled, satisfied, and pulled me into a hug. Over his shoulder, I stared at our wedding photo on the wall, two people who no longer existed. The Elena in that photo believed in forever. The Elena standing here now knew that forever was just another word for temporary, and that some secrets could only be kept if everyone played their part. Daniel thought I was still playing mine. But the performance was ending, and soon, he'd realize he'd been speaking to an audience that understood every single word. The transformation happened overnight. Not in Daniel, but in me. I stopped being the woman who lay awake agonizing over her crumbling marriage and became someone else entirely. Someone calculating. Someone methodical. Someone who understood that knowledge was power, and I had knowledge Daniel didn't even know I possessed. The morning after my visit to Luis and Marisol, I woke up with absolute clarity. The shock had burned away, leaving behind something harder. Something focused. I looked at Daniel sleeping beside me, his face peaceful in the early morning light filtering through our curtains, and felt nothing. Not love, not anger, not even the grief I'd expected. Just a cold determination to protect myself from whatever he'd planned. I started documenting everything. Every morning after Daniel left for work, humming as he grabbed his travel mug and kissed my cheek with practiced affection, I became a detective in my own home. I photographed documents in his office, careful to leave everything exactly as I'd found it. Bank statements showing wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Emails left open on his computer when he forgot to lock it, messages about property transactions, and financial arrangements that mentioned Camila's name repeatedly. Text messages I glimpsed when his phone lit up on the kitchen counter with notifications he thought I couldn't read because they were in Spanish. I bought a small voice recorder online, the kind college students use for lectures, and kept it in my pocket during the few conversations we still had. Every word became potential evidence. Every lie he told was another nail in whatever coffin he was building for himself. I was methodical because I had to be. One mistake, one slip, one moment where Daniel realized I was onto him, and I'd lose my advantage. So I played the role perfectly. The tired wife coming home from work with stories about difficult students and demanding parents. The partner who smiled when he brought home takeout and pretended not to notice when he stepped into the hallway to take calls. The woman he believed was too exhausted and oblivious to see what was happening right in front of her face. 3 days after the house viewing, on a Thursday evening that should have been ordinary, Daniel received a call at 7 o'clock. I was at the kitchen sink washing dishes, my hands deep in soapy water, scrubbing at a casserole dish from dinner. The mundane domesticity of the moment made what happened next feel even more surreal. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at the screen, and I watched his entire demeanor change. His shoulders relaxed, his face softened, and he smiled. Actually smiled. A real, genuine expression of joy I hadn't seen in months. Maybe longer. Had he ever smiled at me like that? I couldn't remember anymore. I need to take this, he said, already walking toward the hallway, already answering before he'd left the room. His voice dropped into that intimate register, the one that used to be reserved for me in the early days of our relationship.
Sí, mi amor.
Yes, my love. I stood frozen at the sink, dish forgotten in my hands, water dripping onto the floor.
Mi amor.
My love. He'd never called me that, not even when we were dating, when everything was new and exciting. That endearment belonged to someone else. To Camila. I dried my hands on a kitchen towel with deliberate slowness, every movement controlled, and moved closer to the doorway. He'd left it slightly ajar, confident I wouldn't understand, even if I did overhear. Through the crack, I could see him pacing, running his hand through his hair in that nervous gesture I'd learned to read over 12 years of marriage. But there was nothing anxious about his voice. He sounded happy. Alive in a way he hadn't been in our house for years.
Pronto estaremos juntos, mi cielo, murmured.
Soon we'll be together, my darling.
Solo un poco más de tiempo. Unas semanas más y todo estará listo. Just a little more time.
A few more weeks, and everything will be ready. A pause while he listened to her response, then that smile again, the one that transformed his face.
La casa casi está lista. El papeleo está procesándose. Ella no sospecha absolutamente nada.
The house is almost ready. The paperwork is processing. She suspects absolutely nothing.
He sido tan cuidadoso. Nunca va a saber qué pasó hasta que ya sea demasiado tarde.
I've been so careful. She'll never know what happened until it's too late. Too late for what? The words echoed in my mind. Too late to stop him? Too late to protect myself? Too late to save anything from the wreckage of our marriage? He paused, listening, and a smile spread across his face. A real smile, the kind I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Maybe years.
Te amo también, Camila. Cuenta los días hasta que pueda verte de nuevo.
I love you too, Camila. I'm counting the days until I can see you again. My hands clenched into fists. There it was finally. Not just the name, not just the plan, but the emotion behind it. He loved her. This wasn't just an affair or a financial scheme. This was a man preparing to leave his entire life behind for someone new, someone he whispered to in Spanish in the dark, someone who made him smile like he used to smile at me. When Daniel returned to the kitchen, I was back at the sink, scrubbing a plate with focused intensity. Work call? I asked, my voice pleasant, curious. Yeah, just the usual chaos. He kissed the top of my head absently, already pulling out his phone to check messages. I might need to take a trip next week. Client meeting in Los Angeles. Los Angeles. Or was it Colombia? I smiled and nodded. That's fine. I'll probably be busy with parent conferences anyway. That night, I lay awake for hours, listening to Daniel's breathing even out into the rhythm of deep sleep. Around 2 in the morning, when I was certain he wouldn't wake, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. Something that would have horrified the old Elena, the one who believed in trust and privacy and the sanctity of marriage vows. I reached across him carefully, slowly, my movements minimal to avoid disturbing the mattress. My fingers closed around his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up, showing a lock screen photo of us from our honeymoon in Greece, both of us tan and happy and impossibly young. We looked like different people. We were different people. My heart hammered so hard I was certain the sound would wake him. Every breath felt loud, every tiny movement magnified in the darkness. I pressed his thumb to the sensor, holding my breath, praying he wouldn't wake. The phone unlocked with a soft click that sounded deafening in the silent room. Daniel shifted slightly, mumbling something incoherent. I froze completely, phone clutched to my chest, every muscle locked. 10 seconds.
20.
Finally, he settled back into sleep, his breathing deep and steady again. I slipped out of bed with excruciating care and padded into the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Sat on the closed toilet lid, phone in my shaking hands, and opened his messages. There were thousands of them. An entire relationship documented in Spanish, stretching back almost a year. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? But I knew the answer. I'd trusted him. I'd believed we were solid even when the signs were everywhere that we weren't. The messages were intimate, detailed, planning a future that had no room for me. Camila sent photos of herself throughout the day. Her at a cafe in Bogota, coffee cup raised in a toast to the camera. Her in a sundress in what looked like a tropical garden. Her lying in bed, hair spread across a pillow, captioned, Echando de Minos, missing you. She was stunning. Young, probably late 20s, with long dark hair and bright, intelligent eyes. Everything I wasn't anymore. Everything I'd stopped being somewhere in the exhaustion of failed fertility treatments and the slow erosion of a marriage I'd thought was surviving when it was actually dying. Daniel's responses were equally intimate. Photos of the house from every angle. Bank statements showing wire transfers with amounts that made my stomach drop. Tens of thousands of dollars I hadn't known we were moving. Flight confirmations to Colombia marked business trips that I now realized were anything but professional. Plans for their future together in that beautiful Spanish-style house that was supposed to be ours, but had never been intended for me at all. But one message thread stopped me cold, made my blood turn to ice in my veins. I had to read it 3 times before my brain would process what I was seeing.
Daniela Dritten, 3 weeks ago. Ella no estará en la foto mucho más tiempo. Ya hablé con mi abogado sobre el divorcio, pero necesito tiempo para mover los activos primero. Una vez que llegues, moveré el resto del dinero a las cuentas offshore y cortaré todos los lazos. Ella nunca sabrá que la golpeo.
She won't be in the picture much longer. I already talked to my lawyer about divorce, but I need time to move the assets first. Once you arrive, I'll move the rest of the money to the offshore accounts and cut all ties. She'll never know what hit her. He talked to a divorce lawyer. Without telling me. While I was making dinner and asking about his day, and trying to figure out why we felt so distant. While he was buying flowers and cooking breakfast, and playing the role of attentive husband. He'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Planning to divorce me, steal our money, and leave me with nothing while he started fresh with Camila in Colombia. But there was more, and it was worse. Messages about business deals with Camila's family. About moving money through their import-export company in Medellin. About cleaning funds and making them legitimate before bringing them back to the United States. The terminology was careful, vague enough to maintain deniability, but the meaning was clear. My cousin Sophia had been right to be worried. This wasn't just about infidelity. Daniel was involved in something that could destroy us both financially and legally. I took screenshots of everything with shaking fingers, then carefully locked his phone and returned it to the nightstand. In the bathroom, I emailed the photos to myself using an account Daniel didn't know about, then deleted the sent messages. Every action felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. The next morning, I called Sophia from my car during my lunch break. "I need a lawyer," I said without preamble. "Someone who handles both family law and financial crimes. Someone aggressive who won't let me get steamrolled." "Elena, what's going on?" "I can't explain everything right now, but Daniel's involved in something bad. Money laundering, maybe fraud. And he's planning to divorce me and leave me holding the bag." My voice cracked. "Sophie, I need help." She gave me a name, Margaret Chen, a lawyer with a reputation for protecting clients in complex divorce cases. "She's expensive," Sophia warned, "but she's worth it. Tell her I sent you." That afternoon, I sat in Margaret Chen's downtown office, a space of glass and steel that spoke of power. Margaret was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes. I laid out everything, showed her the screenshots, played the recordings. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in neat handwriting. When I finished, she looked up and said, "Mrs. Morgan, your husband is not only committing adultery, he's involved in what appears to be international money laundering. The Colombian connection, the offshore accounts, the cash house purchase, all of it points to illegal activity. Can he implicate me? Am I liable for what he's done? Not if you act now. We need to establish that you had no knowledge of these activities, and we need to protect your assets immediately. I'm going to recommend some things aggressive." She leaned forward. "We freeze the joint accounts. We document everything. And we contact the authorities about the financial irregularities." My stomach dropped. The authorities? If your husband is laundering money and you're aware of it, your silence makes you complicit. But if you come forward, cooperate, provide evidence, you're protected. It's the difference between being a co-conspirator and being a victim. The word victim sat heavy in my chest. But she was right. I gathered my courage and nodded. What do I need to do? Over the next week, I became someone new. I opened a bank account and transferred half our savings. I copied every document, every tax return, every investment statement. I met with Detective Sarah Rodriguez, who specialized in financial investigations. Sarah looked at my evidence and whistled low. "Your husband's in deep. Classic laundering patterns. And this Camila, she's more than the other woman." "What do you mean?" "Her family's business in Colombia has been flagged for suspicious activity. Your husband isn't just having an affair. He's in a partnership that will land him in prison." The room spun. "And if I'd stayed quiet? You'd go down with him. Spousal assets are jointly liable. Everything would be seized. You'd be investigated, possibly charged." Sarah's expression softened. "You did the right thing. But it didn't feel right. It felt like betrayal, even though he betrayed me first." That night, Daniel seemed agitated, checking his phone constantly, typing rapidly. At dinner, he barely ate. "Everything okay?" I asked.
Fine.
"Just work stress." But his jaw was tight. Later, I overheard him on another call in panicked Spanish.
"Tengo miedo. La policía preguntó por la transferencia en el banco. Alguien está investigando." "I'm scared."
The police asked about the transfer. Someone's investigating. It was starting. Daniel could feel the walls closing in. "Necesitamos hacerlo to do," he continued. "We need to speed everything up."
"Camila, tienes que venir esta semana."
"Camila, you have to come this week." He was panicking, making mistakes, accelerating a plan already falling apart. The next morning, I drove back to Luis and Marisol's house. I needed allies, and I needed them now. When Marisol opened the door, I didn't wait for pleasantries. I spoke in Spanish, rapid and urgent. "I need your help. Daniel's involved in money laundering with the woman he was buying your house for. I've gone to the authorities, but I need you to know what's happening. He might contact you again, might pressure you to complete the sale." Luis appeared behind Marisol, his face grave. "We suspected something was wrong. We already told him we're not selling. We want no part of whatever he's doing." "Thank you," I said, relief washing over me. "But I need one more thing. I need you to record a conversation with him if he contacts you again. Ask him directly about the financial arrangements, about Camila, about why the house can't be in his name. My lawyer says it could help establish a pattern of deception and illegal activity. Marisol took my hands. Elena will help you. What he's doing, it's wrong. Not just the betrayal, but trying to drag you into his criminal activity. You deserve better. That evening, Luis called me with news. Daniel just contacted us. He's desperate to complete the sale. He's offering an extra $20,000 in cash if we'll put the house in Camila's name next week. I recorded everything. The desperation in his voice was clear. Can you send me the recording? Already done. Elena, be careful. A man this desperate can be dangerous. His words echoed in my mind as I sat at home that night, waiting. Daniel came home late, smelling of whiskey and stress, his eyes bloodshot. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks, with something like fear in his expression. Elena, I need to ask you something important. His voice was strange, uncertain, almost vulnerable. Have you been going through my things? My phone, my office? My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral and confused. Why would I do that? You've always said I don't understand the financial stuff anyway. I let a little hurt creep into my voice, playing my part perfectly. Is something wrong? Are you in trouble? He studied me for a long moment, then shook his head.
No, sorry.
I'm just paranoid from work stress. But he didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. The dynamic had shifted. He suspected maybe I wasn't as oblivious as he'd thought. The next day, Margaret called with decisive news. We have enough. The detective has presented her findings to the Financial Crimes Unit. They're opening an investigation into your husband's activities. But Elena, you need to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally. This is going to move fast now, and it's going to get ugly. How fast? Days, maybe hours. Once they have enough evidence to bring charges, they'll move immediately. You need to decide where you want to be when that happens. Do you want to be home when they come to arrest him? Or do you want to be somewhere safe, away from the confrontation? Somewhere safe. As if anywhere could truly feel safe when your entire life was imploding around you. I'll stay with Sophia, I decided. I'll pack a bag. But tomorrow came faster than I expected. That night, Daniel got a call at 2 a.m. I heard him answer, heard his sharp intake of breath, heard him say in rapid Spanish, ¿Qué quieres decir que no puede salir del país?
La detuvieron.
What do you mean she can't leave the country? They detained her? Camila had been stopped at the airport. The authorities were onto them. Daniel dressed quickly, frantically, grabbing his laptop and documents. He looked at me, still pretending to sleep, and I saw something in his expression.
Fear.
And something else. Calculation. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. Elena, I'm sorry, he whispered. For everything. You deserved better than this. Then he was gone, the front door closing softly behind him. I lay in the dark, those words echoing. An apology and a goodbye. He was running. I called Margaret immediately. He just left. He knows Camila was detained. I think he's trying to leave the country. I'll alert the authorities. Stay where you are. Don't try to follow him or contact him. Let them handle this. The next hours were a blur. Police at my door, asking questions. Showing them everything I documented. Every screenshot. Every recording. Their faces grave as they realized the scope of what Daniel had been planning. One detective, an older man with kind eyes, said, "Ma'am, you probably saved yourself from prison by coming forward. Your husband was going to disappear and leave you to face the consequences." They arrested Daniel at the airport, trying to board a flight to Panama with a suitcase full of cash. The news came through Margaret, who called me with grim satisfaction. They've got him. Multiple charges, money laundering, fraud, attempted flight. The evidence you provided was crucial. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. This man I'd loved, who I'd built a life with, was going to prison. Everything we'd created together was ash. But there was one more thing I needed to do. One final confrontation that would bring everything full circle, that would let me speak the truth I'd been hiding in a language he thought I didn't know. The authorities let me visit him in holding before his arraignment, a courtesy Margaret had arranged. I didn't have to go. I could have let him wonder forever whether I'd known, whether I'd understood, whether his secret language had really kept me in the dark. But I needed him to know. Needed him to understand that his greatest weapon had been his greatest vulnerability all along. When I walked into that stark visiting room with its gray walls and institutional lighting, my heels clicking on the linoleum floor, I felt strangely calm. Beyond anger, beyond grief, in some place of absolute clarity where truth lived without emotion clouding it. Daniel sat behind the glass partition, wearing an orange jumpsuit that looked absurd on him. His hair was uncombed, his face unshaven, dark circles under his eyes speaking of sleepless nights and regrets that had come too late. When he saw me, his entire face transformed. Hope flickered across his features, desperate and pathetic. "Elena," he breathed, reaching for the phone on his side of the glass. I picked up mine slowly, deliberately, letting him wait. For a long moment, we just stared at each other through the barrier. This man I'd shared a bed with for 12 years. This stranger, who had planned my destruction while kissing me goodnight. Then I spoke. Not in English, but in the language he'd thought was his private code. My Spanish was flawless, every word carefully chosen, and I watched his face as understanding dawned like a slow-motion catastrophe. Estuve escuchando desde el principio, Daniel. I was listening from the beginning.
Cada palabra que dijiste en esa casa. Cada conversación telefónica que pensaste que no podía entender. Cada mensaje que te enviaste con Camila planeando cómo destruirme mientras te construías una nueva vida.
The color drained from his face. "You speak Spanish," he whispered, the words barely audible through the phone. "Siempre lo he hablado." I continued, my voice steady and cold as winter. "I've always spoken it."
Mi abuela me enseñó cuando era niña. Pasamos veranos enteros cocinando juntas, hablando solo en español. Pero tú nunca preguntaste.
Ashamist.
Asumiste que yo era estúpida, que no entendería, que podrías hablar libremente delante de mí como si yo fuera un mueble, un objeto sin inteligencia ni agencia.
My grandmother taught me when I was a child. We spent entire summers cooking together, speaking only in Spanish. But you never asked. You assumed. You assumed I was stupid, that I wouldn't understand, that you could speak freely in front of me as if I were furniture, an object without intelligence or agency. "Elena, por favor. I can explain," he started, mixing languages in his panic. "No necesitas explicar nada." I cut him off sharply. "You don't need to explain anything."
Tengo grabaciones de tus conversaciones. Capturas de pantalla de todos tus mensajes con Camila. Testimonios de Luis y Marisol sobre lo que les dijiste. Documentos bancarios mostrando cada transferencia ilegal. Le di todo a las autoridades. Todo. No dejé nada sin descubrir.
I have recordings of your conversations. Screenshots of all your messages with Camila. Testimonies from Luis and Marisol about what you told them. Bank documents showing every illegal transfer. I gave everything to the authorities. Everything. I left nothing undiscovered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His hand tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. "You turned me in. You're the one who reported me." I switched to English, letting each word fall between us like stones. "You were going to frame me, Daniel. Make it look like I was involved in your money laundering scheme, then disappear to Colombia with Camila and leave me to face federal charges while you started your new life. Did you really think I wouldn't protect myself once I knew? It wasn't supposed to happen like this." His voice cracked. "Elena, I loved you once. I did. In the beginning, it was real. I swear it was real. Once, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. But not enough to be honest when you fell out of love. Not enough to end things properly before starting something new. Not enough to keep me out of your criminal activity. Not enough to protect me from the consequences of your choices." I leaned forward, my face close to the glass. "I hope it was worth it, Daniel. The house you'll never live in. The woman you'll never be with. The life you threw away. The freedom you just lost. I hope when you're sitting in prison, You remember that it all fell apart because you underestimated your wife in 2 languages. He reached toward the glass as if to touch me, his eyes desperate. Elena, please. We can fix this. I'll testify against Camila's family. I'll cooperate.
No voy a arreglar algo que tú destruiste. He said quietly.
I'm not fixing something you destroyed. Adios, Daniel. I walked out without looking back. 2 weeks later, I stood in that Spanish-style house one last time. Luis and Marisol had invited me over, wanting to check on me, to offer support in the aftermath of the scandal. The house was still beautiful, still full of light and possibility, but it belonged to someone else's dreams now. Marisol made coffee in her kitchen, and we sat in the courtyard where I'd once stood listening to my husband plan my destruction. How are you holding up? She asked.
I'm surviving.
The lawyers say I'm clear, that they can prove I had no knowledge of Daniel's activities until recently. My job is safe, my reputation intact. The joint accounts are frozen, but I have my own money. I'll be okay. You're more than okay, Luis said firmly. You're strong. You saved yourself. Marisol smiled at me.
Tu silencio fue tu fuerza.
Your silence was your strength. You watched, you listened, and you acted when the time was right. That takes courage. I sipped my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through me. Not just from the drink, but from the kindness of these near strangers who'd shown me more loyalty than my own husband. Thank you, I said in Spanish and then in English, letting both languages flow naturally. For everything. For seeing through his lies. For helping me. For reminding me that there are still good people in the world. As I drove away from that house for the last time, I felt something shift inside me. Not closure exactly, but a door opening. A future where I could speak in any language I chose, where I didn't have to hide parts of myself, where my intelligence and intuition were assets instead of threats. Daniel had tried to use my silence against me. Instead, it had saved me. And now, finally, I could use my voice again. In English, in Spanish, in whatever language I needed to reclaim my life and start over. The truth had been spoken. The lies had been exposed. And I was free. If you discovered your partner was planning to destroy your life while speaking in a language they thought you didn't understand, would you have the strength to stay silent and gather evidence? Or would you confront them immediately and risk losing everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe for more stories about trust, betrayal, and the unexpected ways we find our strength.